Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today is the 27th of August. Today we're doing a frontline update and we're going to begin with Robotyne. So looking at the situation around this village, the Ukrainians control most of the village, including the southern and central parts of the village, but the southern outskirts are most likely a gray zone because of how close they are to the line of contact and to Russian fortifications. Now this is all backed up by video evidence that the Ukrainians control the village. You could look at my map. I have all these videos over here showing Ukrainian forces, including different units over here, including a Bradley that was basically traversing the village itself and hitting Russian positions a couple of days ago. There's a lot of videos over here from the southern part of the village that basically confirm this. And I've seen some Russian maps that dispute this, that show that the situation has Russia in control of the southern part of the village, and the central part of the village is a gray zone, but I haven't seen any evidence to point in that direction. So for now, I'm keeping the map the way it is. And let's move on to what's actually going on, and that is the movement of the 47th Mechanized Brigade towards the front lines. This unit was previously rotated out because it was used at the beginning of the offensive. It was rotated out for a while as you saw the movement of the 10th Army Corps and the movement of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, but over the past week or so, it's been moved in to the front line again. This unit was involved in the final cleansing operations in Robotyne, and now it's also engaging in artillery strikes against some of the Russian fortifications that are to the north of Novoprokopivka. So here you have a video. 47th Brigade artillery hits field ammo depot and a trench. Here's another video from the same brigade of Ukrainian artillery hitting these 6 Russian infantrymen as they were retreating from these fortifications. And this is just a microcosm of what's generally going on in this region. No head-on attacks, but there's artillery strikes, very heavy strikes on these trenches specifically. Where we are seeing the movement is on the eastern flank of Robotyne in these open fields, where the Ukrainians previously were able to solidify control over all of the fortified trenches in this area, and now they are sending in small groups from the 82nd and 46th Air Assault Brigades towards the fields even further south, and they have been able to advance about 2 kilometers from the previous location that was previously confirmed via geolocations. You can see now that the line of contact has shifted about 2 kilometers south. I'm not saying Ukraine controls all of this open area that I'll mark on the map over here, because they really don't. This is just an open field. It is a gray zone, but this area is previously under Russian control, and now it has shifted to a gray zone, with this confirmation coming from a video that was released from the Beaver drone unit. The Beaver drone unit is a UAV unit that has been fighting around Robotyne on the Russian side. They have released a lot of videos showing FPV strikes on infantrymen, on Ukrainian vehicles, and they released a video recently of an FPV drone that hit 2 Ukrainian infantry. And you could see that the location of this video is much further south than was previously imagined to be the actual line of contact. And this is not just a fluke. There was another video released by them of the FPV hitting a Ukrainian infantryman near a tree line. So clearly there's a Ukrainian presence in this area around this specific tree line. And it's not just a Ukrainian concentration around this tree line. There's also a Russian concentration around here, because just to the south of it, you have this video that was released by the 46th Air Assault Brigade of an FPV drone that hit Russian infantrymen northeast of Novoprokopivka. So there were 8 Russian forces that were concentrated near the tree line before being hit by the FPV. I think there's only one that was confirmed dead from this. The others were able to survive. And that just gives you an idea of how close together the Russian and Ukrainian forces were in this specific area. And it does show you how the front line has shifted from where it was previously a couple of days ago around here to over here. And why would the Ukrainians be doing this? Well, the reason that I think they're doing this is because they'd rather not assault the trenches head on that are to the south of Robotyne, just due to the fact that it would be extremely difficult, especially with the Russians moving in reinforcements that we're going to talk about later in the video. So instead, they're pushing through this open area, which is less fortified, and then the goal would be to flank Novoprokopivka. But at the same time, the Ukrainians also have their eyes set on the village of Verbove. Verbove, there's 2 layers of defenses. You have this trench over here, this trench line, which is closer to the village itself. That's over here. And then you have this anti-tank ditch, which is also it's a bit further out. I think it's like a couple hundred meters out. You can see it over here. And this anti-tank ditch is obviously meant to stop any sort of armored columns from making it towards the village. But what I've been seeing actually from the Rybar map, for instance, is that the Ukrainians were actually able to infiltrate past the anti-tank ditch, is in that they're now very close to the trench line. So I'll just show you generally what was depicted on the Rybar map over here. The Ukrainians were located in this area. You could see with the blue lines. Now, there's no visual evidence to confirm that the Ukrainians have even reached the anti-tank ditch. I think we would have seen some by now if that was true, but we're going to have to wait and see as these operations are unfolding and the situation is fluid. And at the same time, there's also videos or actually images, satellite images that showed a lot of fires going on in the area just to the northwest of Verbove. So I'll indicate that on the map. You could see there was a lot of fires. Maybe that's artillery. Maybe that's showing that the front line has shifted closer to this area around the blue square. But that would also show that the Ukrainians are increasing pressure on the outskirts of Verbove. And that makes complete sense because now you have the 82nd and 46th Brigades in the areas around Verbove, in the fields just to the west of it over here. And because Verbove is one of the towns that is on the front line, that's very close to the Ukrainian positions, and would have a lot of utility to the Ukrainian war effort in general if you look at the broader situation, given the fact that Verbove is protected by two defensive lines, and that once you were able to take it over, you'd have access to a bunch of other roads that lead to other key cities, that lead to other key fortifications. So that's part of why Ukraine is increasing pressure in that direction. Now, the Russians aren't sitting idly by as this is happening. The Russians are aware of the potential for a breakthrough past their prepared defensive lines, and this is why they responded by moving in elements of the 76th Air Assault Division over here. So this unit, and this is a division, so it's a large unit. This was previously stationed around Kremina, and there may be some regiments within this division that are still around Kremina. But we know for sure that there are two regiments that were moved in from the Kremina area, the 104th Air Assault Regiment and the 234th Air Assault Regiment, that were moved in to help increase and bolster the defense of Novoprokopivka. And this is pretty significant because 76th Division is a VDV unit. It's one of Russia's most elite units that is currently fighting, previously around Kremina and now around here. We know that they're here because the 73rd Special Naval Operations Center, they released images showing all these patches that they captured from this unit that were around Robotyne or around Novoprokopivka in this general area along the front line, which does indicate their movement to this area. And that also would basically mirror what Ukrainian sources were saying over the past few days about the movement of these units. And these are not the only units that have been moved in recently. You also have the movement of the 7th Air Assault Division, which was previously stationed around Kherson, and they were moved in, I think, last week to help increase the defense as well. So you do see the Russians moving in forces, and specifically those two regiments, based on the numbers that we have about Russian regiments on paper, that would be around 1,800 men to 4,000 men for two regiments. But again, it varies by unit depending on their strength. Just on paper, if they were at full strength, it would be between 1,800 to 4,000 men that were moved in to the area around Robotyne to help bolster the defense. But it could be less just because obviously these units are not at full strength. So keep that in mind. Either way, this will make it harder for Ukraine to break through these defenses because now you're going to have these well-trained units that have experience and they are not completely depleted. They still have the defensive capabilities, especially with the defensive lines that they can use to their advantage. So that will definitely add another layer of difficulty to the Ukrainian offensive activities in this region. But it also means that the Russians will not be able to use this unit or these two regiments in any sort of attack on the Crimea direction, because that's where they were stationed previously, which could also show that the Russians may have to install some of their offensive activities in order to hold the line on the Zaporozhye front. And now to move on to the situation around Klishchiivka. So not much has changed around Klishchiivka. I just want to mention it because there's two videos that I saw circulating over the past 24 hours that they require more context. They need a date, and as long as there's no date, I can't change the map, but they would have some interesting implications if they were recent videos. So here's one. This is a video from the Lyud Brigade fighting in central Klishchiivka. You could see there were in the video, there's Ukrainian infantrymen that are clearing out houses in central Klishchiivka, and there's small arms fire. There's firefights engaging Russian forces. And if this were true, that it would show that the Ukrainians have recently been able to launch attacks and retake some of the houses in Klishchiivka, but we don't know the date for this video, so I haven't changed the map. Then this other video shows a Russian sniper in Klishchiivka working on the Ukrainian positions, but the video is very dark. I can't really surmise anything from it. Only thing that we know is the geolocation, which actually is surprisingly very close to where I marked the front line beforehand, but we don't know the date for that either. The truth is that really any sort of attacks over here are localized in nature. They're not going to yield breakthroughs, at least at the moment. And that's because the Russians didn't move in reinforcements. We've talked about this before. And as we talked about in Robotyne, where they moved in VDV units, in Klishchiivka, they also moved in VDV units to hold the line. They moved in elements of the 106th Airborne Division, the 83rd VDV Brigade, the 31st VDV Brigade. And again, that was very, very important in maintaining the cohesiveness of the Russian front line. Now, the situation around Kupyansk also is very interesting to me because it really is following the same pattern as some of these other Russian attacks on the Luhansk front, like the Zherebets bridgehead, which really for a while was able to make gains. You could say for about a week they were able to advance before the front line stabilized, and we haven't really heard much about any Russian gains along this bridgehead since then. But what the bridgehead did basically achieve is that it was able to move Ukrainian reserves and Ukrainian mechanized brigades that could have been used on the Zaporozhye front to help hold the line around Luhansk front. So very similarly, along the Kupyansk front, there was a period of time which was longer than a week, a couple of weeks, where the Russians were able to advance a couple of kilometers from their positions in Laman Parish and Vilshana. And really, since then, over the past few days, we've really seen the line stagnate. We're not seeing any new reports of gains, nothing that can be confirmed at least. We're not seeing reports of the capture of any villages. But what we did see throughout the course of the Russian advances when they were happening is that the Ukrainians were actually forced to move in elements of mechanized brigades that could have been used elsewhere, that could have been used in Zaporozhye, and instead they were committed to the front line around Kupyansk. So it could either be that the Russian attacks over here were legitimate and died down due to the Ukrainian defense, or that it was all a part of Russia's plan basically to spread the Ukrainians thin, which would divert resources away from their actual objectives for the Ukrainians in the Zaporozhye front. But what we do know undoubtedly is that for now, there are no new Russian gains around Kupyansk. So that's all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.